Greetings. Today we'll be doing chapter 14. I have two videos for it. The title of the chapter is Satan Divided Against Himself. The chapter begins with Girard summarizing the last chapter, actually, the chapter of the expulsion of Legion from the man in Gerasa. And he says that the point of that story, as he sees it, is that the demons are definitively expelled. Their reign is over. This situation that you had in Gerasa of arresting the man, binding the man, having him escape, and then hunting him again, tying him up again, that this is over. Okay? And so then this chapter continues that line of thinking, that line of questioning. Is the casting out of demons really definitive, or is it done by Satan? And the Pharisees accused Jesus of driving out demons not by some sort of divine power, but by the power of Satan himself. Again, exorcisms would not have been all that uncommon in Jesus' day. And then so the question becomes, okay, you can exorcise demons, but what's the power behind that? And Jesus' response has become a very famous response, especially in the United States of America, because of Abraham Lincoln. He says, every kingdom divided itself is heading for ruin, and no town, no household divided against itself can stand. And Lincoln has this famous line during the Civil War that a house divided cannot stand. So he references scripture. And so Jesus' first response to this is kind of, okay, if I do it by Satan, then Satan's over. But then he goes further and asks the question, through whom do your people cast him out? Which indicates that for Jesus, there's a casting out and there's a casting out. You know, there are two types of this. A casting out by Satan, which the Pharisees know because they've already referred to it, and a casting out by the finger of God, which is Jesus's way. Now, the question, so you get something that really looks here like a mimetic rivalry between the Pharisees and Jesus, okay? So the Pharisees are saying, oh yeah, sure, I mean, you can cast out demons, but you're just doing it by Beelzebub, doing it because you're a devil yourself, is in effect what they're saying. And Jesus said, oh yeah? Well, if that's true, then Satan's over. And besides that, who do your people do it by? They just do it by Satan too. And you can see this in the continuation of the story, this sense that that there is I don't think that Jesus is in mimetic rivalry with him, but I think there's a sense in which people can see it that way. And so he goes on to say, how do you rob a strong man's house? First, you have to be stronger than the strong man. You have to overcome the strong man and bind him, and then you're free to rob his house. And so, in effect, Jesus is saying, is this your image of God? That God is just a stronger Satan, and that God is coming in to do the same violence to this house that Satan does to other houses? Because that's what the Gerasenes think. They think, oh, you know, we have this, you know, terrible man who we can't bind, and now here comes someone along who could do it, who's even stronger, and how are we going to bind this guy, right? And I think Jesus does just leave them, we'll talk about this more in a little while, leaves the Gerasenes, and now he's back with the Jews, and he wants to give them something different. Jesus speaks the language of his universe, and it's our universe. He speaks to violent people. In the Matthew version, it says, knowing what was in their minds. In other words, I take this to mean Jesus not only knew what they were thinking, that they're thinking that he's doing this by Satan's power, but he knows the way their minds work. And then interestingly, and we'll talk about this some more in class, Mark calls this whole discourse a parable. And what parable basically means a kind of story. And one of the things about parables is you have to interpret them. Parables are often about sheep or seeds or things like that. And Jesus is clearly not giving us a discourse on sheep herding. He's clearly not giving us a discourse on agriculture. Okay, so in that sense, they need interpretation. And then I want to read this next rather long quote to you because I just think it's so critical to our understanding of the Gospels. The essential factor, this is from page 186, the essential factor in the gospel use of parable is Jesus' willingness to be imprisoned within the representation of persecution from the persecutor's standpoint, and to do so for the sake of his listeners who cannot understand any other viewpoint since they are prisoners of it themselves. Okay? So what Girard is telling us, and I think he's absolutely correct here, is Jesus does speak mythical language. He speaks from the representation of persecution from the persecutor's standpoint. And as we know from reading this book, that's what a myth is. He speaks, he's using to use mythical language for our sake, because this is the only thing we can understand. But he's doing it to destroy the system and to help us understand another meaning. And therefore, we have to be, when we interpret this stuff, very careful to make sure that we do, in fact, break out of the system. The kingdom of Satan. Okay. First, Girard claims that this passage simply repeats what he's been saying. Violence casts itself out by violence as the foundation of all human societies. Okay. So when Jesus speaks about if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How can his kingdom stand? And so Girard sees this as confirmation of what we've been talking about up until now. Violence is at the foundation of all human societies. It is the principle. Satan is the principle of every human kingdom. Okay? Again, one of these all-inclusive claims. Every kingdom. The kingdom of Satan is the original violence that cast itself out in the original hidden deed, the murder of the scapegoat. That is what's at the root of our society, the root of all of our societies. Okay. This original hidden deed will also be the end of Satan. His founding principle and his ultimate destruction are the same thing, the scapegoat. Okay? And that's why Jesus is the scapegoat. Because by becoming that, he undoes Satan. Okay? Girard points out that Matthew's very clear about making this every kingdom. Okay? All kingdoms, all cities, all houses. You start with the kingdom, you move to the city, you move now to the house. All are divided against themselves. All are based on this one principle. And now we get a reversal of this. Divine expulsion only exists for the representation of persecution from the persecutor's standpoint. It's not God who is doing this. As Girard says, the force of expulsion always originates in Satan, and God has nothing to do with it. That's the top of page 189. It is more than enough to put an end to the kingdom of Satan. Okay? This clear separation of the violence from God.